You know that feeling when you refresh your banking app? It's almost a nervous tick at this point. You're not expecting a miracle. You're not waiting for a deposit to land. You just want to look at it. You want to see the number, maybe imagine it growing by a few pennies of interest, and convince yourself that you're making progress. You see the balance. It's good. It's better than it was last year. Maybe you're sitting at $60,000, $70,000. You're doing the right things. You're contributing to the 401k. You're not buying stupid stuff you can't afford. And yet, you don't feel rich. You don't even feel particularly safe. You just feel like you're on a treadmill that's moving slightly faster than you can walk. And honestly, it's exhausting because you've been told that if you just do X, Y, and Z, the wealth feeling kicks in. But it hasn't. My name is Mac, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, financial psychology, and why some people seem to effortlessly build wealth while others stay stuck in the same financial patterns for decades. And I've realized something that nobody really talks about when it comes to personal finance. We talk about the getting started phase, that $1,000 emergency fund stuff. We talk about the end game, retiring on a yacht or whatever. But there is this massive, murky, confusing middle ground. And specifically, there's a line in the sand, a specific threshold that changes everything. It's the $100,000 turning point. See, the reason you feel stuck right now isn't because you're bad with money. It's not because you aren't working hard enough. It's because you're trying to play the game of wealth accumulation with the rules of the poverty mindset. And the $100,000 mark, that's where the rule book gets completely rewritten. Today, I want to walk you through exactly what happens at that number, why it feels so impossible to reach, and why, once you actually touch it, your brain is probably going to try to sabotage you. This is the stuff I wish someone had told me 5 years ago. Let's get into it. So, let's start with the cold, hard math, but I want to explain it in a way that actually makes sense to your gut, not just a spreadsheet. We all love the concept of compound interest. Albert Einstein supposedly called it the eighth wonder of the world. It's this beautiful idea that your money makes money, which then makes more money. You put in $1, and it magically spawns cents. And when you're looking at a graph of $1 million over 30 years, it looks like a hockey stick. It goes flat for a long time, and then whoosh, it shoots up to the sky. But here's what nobody warns you about. When you're in the flat part of that graph, it doesn't feel like a hockey stick. It feels like a ceiling. If you're starting from zero, or even worse, if you're starting from negative, student loans, credit card debt, whatever, your first few $1,000s of net worth feel like they weigh 1,000 pounds each. Let's say you manage to scrape together $10,000. You are incredibly proud of yourself. You did it. But then you do the math on the interest. If you're getting a modest 7% return in the stock market, that $10,000 is generating, wait for it, $700 a year. That's like $50 a month. $50 isn't life-changing money. You can't retire on $50 a month. You can't even really notice it. You have to work for weeks or months to save that $10,000, and the market rewards you with the price of a couple of pizzas. It feels almost insulting, doesn't it? This is the mathematical wall. You are doing the heavy lifting. You are the one waking up early, skipping the fancy brunch, driving the older car. You are putting in the 100% of the effort, and the money is just sitting there, barely lifting a finger to help. I remember when I finally hit my first $20,000 saved. I felt like I had climbed Mount Everest. I looked at my statement, and I waited for the feeling of financial freedom to hit me. I thought, okay, I'm safe now. And then my car made a weird noise. A noise that cost $1,500 to fix. In a split second, my Mount Everest achievement felt like a molehill. I realized that $20,000 isn't wealth. It's just a slightly thicker buffer against catastrophe. It's a bigger shock absorber, but you're still driving over the same potholes. This is why the first $100,000 is so incredibly hard. Because for 99% of that journey, you are the engine. Your savings rate, your ability to not spend money, is the only thing moving the needle. Compound interest is basically asleep in the passenger seat. It's not helping you steer. It's not paying for gas. It's just there waiting, and you have to accept that. You have to accept that you're going to work for years, feeling like you're pushing a boulder uphill alone. But here is the turning point. The secret that keeps you going when you're at $50,000 and want to give up because it feels pointless. The math flips. It literally does a 180-degree turn. Once you cross that $100,000 threshold, the interest starts to match your contributions. Let me give you an example. If you're saving $10,000 a year, which is a respectable amount, you are doing the heavy lifting. But once you have $100,000 invested, that same 7% return generates $7,000 a year. Suddenly, the market is doing 70% of the work for you. You contribute $10,000. The market adds $7,000. Your total wealth grows by $17,000 that year. You've gone from pushing the boulder alone to having a giant push it with you. And the further you go, the more the boulder starts to roll on its own. When you hit $200,000, the market is adding $14,000. It's paying for your entire savings goal plus more. That is the turning point. It's the moment when wealth stops being something you chase and starts being something that attracts you. But to get there, you have to survive the valley of disappointment, where you're doing all the work and seeing none of the magic. Okay, so let's say you grind through the math. You ignore the fact that compound interest feels like a scam for the first 5 years. You finally hit the big number. You see $100,000 in your accounts. You made it. But then something weird happens. You look in the mirror, and you look exactly the same. You're still driving to the same job. You're still living in the same apartment or house. Your friends don't high-five you in the street. The barista at the coffee shop doesn't give you a free latte and say, "Congratulations on your asset allocation." This brings me to the second major shift, the identity crisis. We have this idea in our heads that rich people live differently. They fly private. They wear Gucci. They eat at restaurants where you can't pronounce the menu. You have $100,000. You are statistically wealthier than 90% of your peers, probably more. You are richish, but because your daily reality hasn't changed, your brain rejects the label. I've seen this happen so many times. People hit a milestone like $50,000 or $100,000, and they get frustrated. They feel like they've been good for so long that they deserve a reward. And because they don't feel rich internally, they start spending money to bridge the gap between their reality and their identity. This is where the lifestyle creep whispers in your ear. It says, "Hey, you've been responsible. You can afford that nicer car now. You have a six-figure net worth. Why are you drinking cheap coffee?" It's a trap. It's a psychological trap because $100,000 is a lot of money, but it's not by Ferrari money. It's not even by a brand new Tesla money if you don't want to wreck your progress. You see, the turning point here is realizing that your identity is not defined by your consumption. It sounds so cliche to say, but it's true. You have to develop an invisible ego. You have to be able to look at your brokerage account balance, see that comma, and feel a sense of pride that has nothing to do with buying things. I remember talking to a guy. I'll call him Dave. Dave had saved up about $80,000. He was obsessed with trucks. He wanted this specific truck that cost about $60,000. He had the cash. He could literally walk into the dealership and buy it. But if he did that, he would be resetting his clock. He would be going from $80,000 to $20,000. He would be throwing himself back into the valley of disappointment, where compound interest stops working. I told him, "Dave, if you buy that truck, you aren't buying a vehicle. You are firing your hardest working employee. You are taking your $100,000, which is ready to start making you money for free, and you're trading it for a hunk of metal that loses value every single day." He didn't listen. He bought the truck. And sure, he looked cool driving it for about 3 weeks. Then the payment wasn't an issue because he paid cash, but the gas, the insurance, the maintenance, it all added up. And 2 years later, he had about $90,000. He had barely moved the needle. He had spent 2 years walking up a down escalator. That is the danger of the $100,000 turning point. You think you've arrived, so you stop walking. This leads me perfectly into the third big insight. When you're starting from zero, financial advice is almost entirely defensive. It's about protection. It's about budgeting, cutting coupons, avoiding fees, paying off high-interest debt. You're in a bunker. You're trying to stop the bleeding. You're trying to hold on to what little you have. But once you cross that $100,000 threshold, you have to flip the switch. You have to stop playing defense and start playing offense. Here's what I mean by that. When you have $1,000 to your name, saving an extra $50 by canceling a subscription is a 5% increase in your net worth. It matters. It's huge. But when you have $100,000, saving $50 is statistically irrelevant. It's 0.05%. If you spend 10 hours trying to save $50, you're valuing your time at $5 an hour. That is not a wealthy mindset. At the $100,000 mark, your focus has to shift from saving money to making more money. And I don't just mean working harder at your job. I mean optimizing your assets. It means asking, how can I make this $100,000 work harder? This is the phase where you start looking at your career differently. You might realize that taking a course or getting a certification that costs $2,000 could lead to a $10,000 raise. That is a 400% return on investment. The stock market can't give you that consistently. You start to see your skills as the highest yielding asset you own. It's also the phase where you get smarter about taxes and accounts. Maybe you stop using a standard savings account and finally open that health savings account, HSA, you've been reading about. Maybe you max out your Roth IRA for the first time. These are offensive moves. You aren't just plugging holes in the boat, you're upgrading the engine. I fell into this trap myself, honestly. I got so good at being frugal that I forgot how to be productive. I would spend hours researching which credit card gave 2% cash back instead of 1.5%. I felt productive. I felt like I was managing my finances. But in reality, I was ignoring a side project idea I had that could have made me an extra $500 a month. I was focusing so hard on the pennies slipping through the cracks that I didn't see the dollar bills lying on the sidewalk. The $100,000 turning point demands that you stop sweating the small stuff so you can obsess over the big stuff. Stop skipping that $3 coffee if it helps you focus on your work. Start thinking about how to negotiate a higher salary. Start thinking about starting that small business. You've built the foundation. Now it's time to build a house. So we've talked about the math, the spending, and the strategy. Now I want to talk about the fear. Because, strangely, hitting $100,000 can actually make you more afraid than when you had nothing. When you're broke, you have nothing to lose. You're playing with house money in a way. If you lose your job, it sucks, but you're used to being broke. You know how to survive ramen noodles. But once you have a six-figure portfolio, suddenly you have something to protect. You open your app and you see $100,000. You think, wow, that is a life-changing amount of money. And then the market drops 10%. Now, this has happened to everyone. The market goes up, the market goes down. But when you have $500, a 10% drop is $50. Whatever. Who cares? But when you have $100,000, a 10% drop is $10,000. That is a car. That is a year of rent for some people. Seeing your account balance flash red and drop by 5 figures in a single day can induce genuine panic. I've seen people who have worked for years to get to this point, and the moment the market corrects, which it always does, they sell everything. They panic. They move to cash. They lock in their losses because the pain of losing $10,000 is too much to bear. This is the psychological barrier of the $100,000 mark. You move from being an aggressive accumulator to a conservative protector. You want to put the money in a vault and guard it with a dragon. But here's the hard truth. If you treat $100,000 like a fragile egg, it will never hatch. It will never become the million you need it to be for retirement. You have to develop a stomach of steel around this time. You have to train yourself to look at a $10,000 drop and say, oh, nice, everything is on sale. It sounds ridiculous, but that is the mindset of wealth. If you're 30 or 40 years old, a market crash is not a threat. It is an opportunity for your $100,000 to buy more shares at a discount. This is easier said than done, by the way. I'm not sitting here telling you it's easy to watch your hard-earned money evaporate on a screen. It keeps me up at night sometimes. But you have to zoom out. You have to look at the 10-year chart, not the 24-hour chart. The $100,000 turning point requires you to trust the system more than you trust your fear. All right, let's move on to something a bit more abstract, but equally powerful. There is a strange social phenomenon that happens when you cross this threshold. You become part of a secret club, but you don't get a membership card. Let me ask you this. How many of your friends know exactly how much money you have? For most of us, the answer is zero. Maybe a spouse. But that's it. Money is the last taboo. We talk about our dating lives, our health issues, our family drama. But we never talk about the number in our bank account. So, you hit $100,000. You are achieving something that 90% of people your age will never achieve. You are winning the game. But to the outside world, you are exactly the same. You're still going to the same dinners, splitting the bill. You're still listening to your friends complain about being broke while you sit there silently, not wanting to be arrogant. This creates a feeling of dissonance. It's called stealth wealth, or sometimes just feeling like a fraud. You feel like you're living a double life. At work, you're just an employee. At home, you're just a regular person. But in the back of your mind, you're thinking, I have the power to change my life completely if I wanted to. This can actually be dangerous because it leads to isolation. You feel like nobody understands your struggle. Your friends are struggling to pay rent. You're struggling to decide which index fund to overweight. It sounds like a rich people problem, and it is, but it's a real problem. It's lonely at the top, even if the top is just the first hill. The turning point here is realizing that you don't need validation from others to make your wealth real. You don't need to buy a flashy watch to signal, I have arrived. You don't need to tell your friends, guess what guys, I have $100,000 now. You have to find peace in the silence. You have to become comfortable with the fact that your greatest achievement is also your most secret. I found this really hard. I wanted to brag. I wanted to tell someone, look, I did it. I'm not a failure. But I learned that true confidence is quiet. It doesn't need to scream. It just knows. And that is a powerful shift in personality. When you stop needing external validation for your success, you stop making stupid financial decisions to impress people who probably aren't paying attention anyway. This brings me to the final and perhaps most profound shift that happens at $100,000. It's the question of enough. For a long time, your goal was just more. More than zero, more than debt, more than last month. But $100,000 is a substantial number. In many parts of the world, or even in many parts of this country, if you live frugally, $100,000 invested can generate enough passive income to cover a significant portion of your basic expenses. Suddenly, the goal isn't just get rich. The goal becomes get free. You start doing the math. You think, okay, if I have $100,000 and I live on $40,000 a year, the market pays for a quarter of my life. That is huge. That is freedom. But then the paradox kicks in. The closer you get to freedom, the more you realize you want more freedom. And the more you realize how much stuff costs. It's a moving goalpost. When you had $0, you thought $100,000 would make you feel set for life. Now that you have $100,000, you realize you actually need $1.5 million to retire comfortably. The goalpost moves. It moves way out into the distance. This can be incredibly demotivating if you aren't careful. You can fall into the trap of thinking, I'll never get there. Why bother? But the turning point is realizing that $100,000 isn't the finish line. It's the first base camp. You've climbed K2. Now you can see Everest. And yeah, Everest looks terrifying. It looks impossible. But you also know something you didn't know when you were at sea level. You know that you can climb. You have proven to yourself that you can do the hard work. You have a discipline. You have a patience. You have to reframe the goal. It's not about hitting some magical number where rainbows shoot out of your wallet. It's about buying back your time. $100,000 buys you options. It buys you the ability to quit a toxic job and take a lower-paying one that makes you happier because you have a cushion. It buys you the ability to take a sabbatical. It buys you sleep at night. When you shift your focus from how much can I accumulate to how much freedom can I buy, the game changes completely. $100,000 is a massive amount of freedom. Even if it's not retire on a beach freedom, it's tell your boss to stick at freedom. And that, honestly, is worth more than Gucci. It's worth more than a sports car. It's the ultimate luxury. So, we've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about the math, that brutal first half where you do all the work. We talked about the identity crisis of not feeling rich, the trap of lifestyle inflation, the shift from defense to offense, the fear of losing it, the loneliness of stealth wealth, and the paradox of enough. If you're sitting there right now, looking at your accounts, and you're at $40,000 or $60,000, and you feel tired, I just want to tell you that it's normal. It is supposed to be hard. If it were easy, everyone would have a six-figure net worth. The fact that you are struggling with it means you are in the fight. You're doing the work. The $100,000 turning point isn't just a number on a screen. It is a transformation of who you are. You cannot cross that line without becoming a different person. You become more patient. You become more confident. You become more secure. And the crazy part is, once you get there, the second $100,000 is faster. And the third is even faster. The snowball is real. You just have to build the snowball first. And that part is cold and wet and miserable. But once it starts rolling, you can't stop it if you tried. So, what do you do with this information? How do you actually use this? First, acknowledge the phase you are in. If you're in the pushing the boulder phase, accept it. Embrace the grind. Stop looking for the magic shortcut. There isn't one. Just keep pushing. Calculate how many months or years until you hit the $100,000 mark. Write it down. Put on your fridge. That is your mission. Second, protect your identity. Don't let the number go to your head, but don't let it shrink your heart. Stay humble. Keep your old friends. Don't become the person who talks about crypto at Thanksgiving dinner. Be the person who quietly, steadily builds a fortress of solace around themselves. Third, switch to offense. Start asking, how can I earn more? Instead of just, how can I save more? Look for the 400% returns on your skills and career. You've built the base, now accelerate. And finally breathe. You are doing better than you think you are. In a world of consumerism and debt, simply having a positive net worth puts you ahead of the curve. Having $100,000? You are leading the pack. This journey isn't a sprint. It's a marathon with hurdles, steep hills, and sometimes really bad weather. But the view from the $100,000 mark, it's pretty good. It gives you a vantage point you didn't have before. You can see the path ahead. It's clear. It's scary, sure, but it's clear. Keep walking. Keep saving. Keep believing that the math works, even when it feels like it doesn't. Because I promise you, the turning point is coming. And when you hit it, you'll realize that all those years of nobody noticing were actually years of you becoming the kind of person who doesn't need them to notice. And that is the real wealth. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I know this was a bit of a deep dive, but I think these are the conversations we need to be having. Money isn't just math, it's psychology, it's behavior, it's life. If you found this helpful, or if it just made you feel a little less alone in the struggle, hit that like button. It helps the algorithm show this to other people who might be stuck in that same valley. And if you haven't already, subscribe. We got a lot more of these money psychology deep dives coming up. Until next time, keep pushing the boulder. The top of the hill is closer than you think.